The first sign that you're losing personal space at work is you stay on when you really need to step away. Highly sensitive people tend to prioritize harmony, avoid tension, and instinctively read the room. And that makes us stay quiet, offer help, and often suppress our own needs. Here's some examples of what it means to give your space away in subtle ways that you may not be wanting to do. For example, staying at your desk when you really need to walk or break. We all need breaks. We have physical bodies that we live in. And if we just stay at our desk without breaks, then it can lead to overwhelm very quickly. Or letting a coworker drop in for 20 minutes because they're upset, even though you're exhausted or you're under a deadline or you have too much going on. Or keeping your headphones off to seem approachable, or keeping the door open to seem approachable, even if the noise is actually overstimulating. These are small ways that you're giving away your space, and it can lead you to not paying attention to what is going on inside of you so that you can do your best job at work and stay as balanced as possible. Without personal space, highly sensitive people experience emotional flooding, have trouble focusing or making decisions, and it can show up even as body tension, like physical symptoms of fatigue or headaches, or tight chest, or sighing, or foggy brain. The body lets you know when you actually need to stand up for your space. Sometimes just staying in a conversation longer than your system can handle is something that can overwhelm in a small way, but in a measurable way for highly sensitive people. And so pay attention. Pay attention to yourself, what your needs are, and keep in mind that your purpose is to serve the customers or the company that you're working for, and you want to give your best. So it's a matter of aligning your actions so that you're able to give your best instead of letting them get diffused and spent by things that are draining your energy. One of the issues that comes in for highly sensitive people is that we sometimes feel guilty about taking breaks or asking for space or interrupting the distractions that are pulling us in many different directions. And a key thought that you can question if you want to explore this further is to look at the thought, if I say that I need space, then they'll think I'm rude or they'll think I'm selfish. And you can literally question this. I love doing the work of Byron Katie, so I will put this up to the 4 questions of the work and find turnarounds and examples and use that as a kind of meditation. So if I ask for this space, they're going to think I'm rude. Is it true? And just go through that process. So the second way or sign that you're losing personal space at work is that you're avoiding boundaries because you don't want to seem rude. That's kind of where we're just headed here. So if you avoid setting clear limits, the fear is that you may come across as unkind or aloof or not a team player or something like that. And this is just a need to fit in socially. And while it's great to fit in socially, there are limitations, and we have different limitations as highly sensitive people, and we have to respect those. If you're taking care of others' comfort more than your own, then that's not really actually doing anything. It's kind of like a side track where you let other people's issues, because you happen to be a good listener, come above your own, or you let other people's demands come above your own. And then when you are trying to get something done, it can cause conflict and it can cause stress, and it can make you feel like you want to get out of there. And then the mind goes into all or nothing thinking, which is like, I'm just going to quit my job, But that's the extreme version of it. Little ways of standing up for yourself asking for your space and respecting your own space can make a huge difference in the quality of your experience at work. And then the third area where you may be losing personal space at work, a sign that you're losing personal space, is when you're overgiving to clients or bosses at the expense of yourself. As you can see, these are all on the same theme here of putting others above yourself, which in some ways is a great thing, but it has to be done in balance. So, for example, maybe you respond immediately to everything. Slack pings, emails, calendar invites. It's like, boom, you're there every time. Every time you get interrupted when you're doing deep work, it takes 23 minutes for your mind, your brain to come back to a coherent pattern of functioning and go deeper into the work. So these constant distractions and pings and invitations will prevent you from going deeper in your work, and that's very frustrating as a highly sensitive person. Another way that you may end up overgiving to clients or bosses at the expense of yourself is to overwork, overdeliver, or absorb too much responsibility out of fear of disapproval. You basically may be believing something like, if I don't go above and beyond, then I won't be safe, or I won't be respected, or I might lose my job, or I won't be seen as someone carrying their weight around here. So it's good to question this identity that comes in of being the reliable one. I am reliable. You can always count on me. I always do a good job. This can become an identity. And it's good to ask yourself, what is that costing you? And is it really balanced? Is it really necessary? And are there other options? So what happens if your boss or clients keep pushing? Even when your boundaries are clear, sometimes there's some power dynamics in play that make it hard to say no. A boss has more power, they can fire you. Or a client has that power, they can fire you. And so for highly sensitive people, we are aware of that, and we also fear disapproval. We don't like conflict. We don't like letting people down. And it's easy to end up swallowing our no or swallowing our boundaries instead of standing up for them in situations like that. So how can that show up? For example, saying yes too quickly. Bosses and clients ask for a lot, and we may just say, yes, of course, customer's always right. Boss is the one. I'm just going to do what they ask. And while that's a good thing, the yes too quickly can end up putting more on our plates than we're actually able to do. And we can end up delaying breaks or canceling time off to be a team player. We can think that we must earn our rest or justify our limitations instead of looking at those as just reality, and we have to work within those limitations. So a way to work with this is to ask yourself, what am I afraid will happen if I say no or if I set a limit? Whose approval am I chasing, and what is it costing me? So another area is if your boss or your customer is continuing to demand, you may want to play with a few ways of talking back to them in a way that's not causing conflict, but is reiterating your boundary. I always find that saying no the first time is hard enough, and then if somebody doesn't respect my boundary, and then I have to say no again, that's doubly hard. But it's a common thing, and it's important because people don't always hear the first no, or they want to test your no and see how strong it is. And so it is valuable to practice finding ways to say no again in a way that they can understand, that is also kind to them and kind to you. Things like, I'd be happy to take this on. I just want to make sure I can give it my proper focus. And what can I move off my plate to make room for this? So this is a great question for a boss. Okay, I'd love to do this. Let's do a great job on it. And I'm going to need to move something else off, you make that decision. And it really is, it communicates the issue very clearly. Or I can do that by this deadline that's maybe a reasonable deadline, or I can rush it for a sooner deadline, but I won't be able to use my usual standard. What's most important here? And you really put the decision-making back onto the boss or the client so that they see that the reality of what they're dealing with. Because the tendency is to just say, oh, yes, sure, I'll do that. And then now you have to work late, you have to work long hours, you have to push yourself. And that comes at the cost of your own nervous system. Or simply, let me check what I have on my plate before I say yes. I want to make sure I don't overextend. And it's just simple communication. So these are some things to think about when you're at work. We tend to think about personal space when we're in personal relationships, and that has its own challenges and value in finding our personal space and taking our personal space. But at work, it may be even more complicated because of the power dynamics of being somebody working for someone else. And that could be that you're going to risk your job if you stand up for yourself. So you have to be clear about your communication, and you have to be clear with yourself what your values are. And if you take the time to do that, the chances are you're going to be delivering on a much higher level because you're not overextending yourself.